I'm going to very briefly introduce our other two panelists, and we will allow them for about 10 minutes to have a brief discussion with you on what they have heard from your talk. First, there is Ernie Regier, who's well known to many people here as the co-founder of Project Plowshares and also a professor at University of Waterloo. And there is, next to him is Trevor Finlay, who is the director of the Canadian Centre for Treaty Compliance. So I'll now open the floor to them, and if they have any questions for Pavel. Trevor, would you like to begin?
Thank you very much, and hello, Pavel. Thank you for your excellent presentation. I'm just wondering whether Russia has ever initiated a dialogue with China to determine when China might enter the nuclear disarmament business, and whether transparency measures and cooperative measures with China would assist in the process generally. Thanks.
Well, there is a. I don't think there is any. Certainly, there is no formal arms control and disarmament dialogue with China, but I would mention that there is there are contacts, and actually there was an agreement, I believe, in 1997 on detargeting of strategic nuclear forces. So Russia and China do not target each other, as the Russia and the United States and other countries don't target each other as well. So there have been some contacts, and again, there is quite a bit of mistrust in Russia about China and about the apparently disparity in economic potentials on both sides. But there are some encouraging steps. I think there is cooperation in space. You know that Russia helped China with its manned program in space. There is cooperation in nuclear area. There were some agreements. Russia is helping China to build the nuclear power industry. So, and I think that those areas are important steps that eventually will bring Russia and China closer together and will help them to maybe move towards talks about their nuclear forces.
And Ernie, if you have a question.
Sure. Good morning, Pavel, and thank you for your comments. I have a question about about NATO and its current review of its strategic concept. And I'd be interested in knowing the extent to which this is an important event for Russia. Is Russia following these discussions? Are the outcome, is it trying to shape the outcome, and does it have a stake in that, or does it regard this as a sideshow? Just the attitude towards, I mean, particularly the nuclear elements of the strategic concept. I know that there are broader elements of enlargement and so forth that are very important, but I just whether the nuclear elements are of importance to it.
Well, certainly Russia is watching very carefully at what's happening in NATO, and as you all know, the NATO expansion became one of the contentious points in the relationship between NATO and Russia and Russia and the United States. I would say it's a difficult and complex process. There is certainly there is a genuine desire in Russia to see that the military force does not play an important role in Europe anymore. So, for example, there was certainly in Russia the NATO campaign in Serbia and Kosovo in '99. That certainly made a very strong impression on Russia, and we still are hearing the repercussions of that. So there is a bit of that. At the same time, it's hard to say that Russia is genuinely interested in having great relations with NATO. I mean, there are a lot of people in Moscow who are making their political careers on these kind of Russian-NATO tensions. And again, if we go back to about 10 years or so ago, we will see that there was a dialogue between Russia and NATO. There were, and dialogue, I don't mean the Russian representative being in Brussels, but there were real contacts between peacekeepers. There were contacts between people who were involved in training and other missions. So, and that created sort of some possibilities for actually normalizing the relations. Those things are gone largely now. So the contacts were curtailed, and I think that partially is responsible for the deterioration of relations. So I think there is interest in Russia in having NATO to take into account Russia's views, but at the same time, it's not clear if Russia is ready to play the constructive role in that process, in the sense that if Russia is ready to work with NATO together to make sure that there is no mistrust on each side, because as I think that this is exactly the situation when it takes both sides to come to an agreement that would work for them. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Pavel. And now, in a minute, I'm going to open the forum for questions from the audience, but I just want to caution everyone that we only have about 15 minutes totally for these questions. So please ask just one question each, and we want questions rather than statements, because there'll be lots of room informally afterwards for discussion. So questions from the floor?
Thank you for your enlightening comments. We have a panel this afternoon at this conference on the possibility of an Arctic nuclear weapon-free zone. And in light of the comments you've just made about Russian-NATO relations, could you perhaps say a few words about how Russia regards the Arctic in the context of its relationship with the West, and also in the context of possible future reductions in nuclear arms? Thank you.
Well, that's a very good question. I'm not sure I know the details about the kind of Arctic policy. It's certainly true, as far as I can tell, that Russia regards Arctic as an important area, and from the economic standpoint, and I think Russia certainly wants its interests to be taken into account when in all the questions related to Arctic. I don't think there is a lot of thinking sort of. I don't think that people take this issue as a military issue, although some people probably do, and I do believe that there's a lot of room there for diplomacy to work the economic development issues there.
And before I take the next question, I'd just like to add that we will be having two other panelists who will be talking on slightly different subjects. So if we could keep our questions focused on the topics that Pavel is specifically concerned with. Next question. Is there a button, a little white button?
Oh, okay, somebody's gotten the button. In the history of the success of Shane Roberts from Ottawa, I'm a futurist emergency management and national security for the federal government. The success in the past of advances in arms reduction has been in part contingent on so-called national technical means. In effect, the possibility of Russia and the U.S. each having independent means of intelligence to verify whether the other side was cheating. Now, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia has had an attrition in a lot of its military capabilities. How confident are the Russians of their means, of national technical means of spying on the Americans, and being able to feel confident that the Americans are meeting reductions that the Russians might do, might make also?
Thank you. That's a very good question, because it's not only Russia. It's how confident we all are that both countries are meeting their obligations. On national technical means, I think it is true that Russia does not quite have the capability that the Soviet Union had in terms of reconnaissance and things like that. I don't think that it's very important in the sense that there is for verification of arms control agreements. Again, there is this famous definition of the sufficiency of verification. It's you have to detect sort of militarily significant violations, and I think we are at the point where militarily significant basically means that there is not much that the United States could do kind of unilaterally or covertly that would change the military situation very significantly. So I think from that point of view, it's not very important. At the same time, I think it's important that the Soviet capabilities and Russian capabilities, and to some extent the U.S. National technical means, they allow the international community to keep an eye on the developments. For example, I think it's a great contribution that the two countries had to submit their data on their arsenals every 6 months under START Treaty. That was a very important transparency measure that actually allowed people from all countries to keep track of what's going on in the United States and Russia. Now that, as you mentioned, now that the United States would not be concerned about Russia actually having that capability, we may actually lose this because there is certainly neither country is perfectly willing to open up all its data. So this is why, as I said, this is why I think it's very important to keep an eye on the transparency and verification frameworks that will come up out of the current negotiations, because this is the key for the progress in disarmament.
Thank you very much for your comments. My question relates to the public. We have the feeling here in Toronto that the public has lost knowledge and interest in the anti-nuclear movement. I think in Ukraine they gave up nuclear weapons, probably partly because of Chernobyl. Could you tell me a little bit about women's anti-nuclear groups or the public in general? I know the school children have a peace day in September. Are they learning about conflict resolution?
Well, that's a very important point. Unfortunately, I should say that the public attitude toward nuclear weapons in Russia is, I wouldn't say it's positive, but it's certainly it's fairly common for the Russians to see nuclear weapons as an important part of the identity of the state or the country. And certainly that's being helped by the kind of official, the party line, what I say, that reinforces that view. At the same time, there are positive signs. I think there was a public opinion poll a few months ago that asked the Russian public whether they believe that nuclear weapons are vital for Russian security. And if I remember correctly, the responses actually were split. About half of the public said that the nuclear weapons are not important, which I think, given the again, if you look at the discussion on the TV and in the media in Russia, that was a remarkably high proportion of people who don't believe that nuclear weapons are important. There is not much. There are not very many kind of grassroots groups that would be looking into nuclear policy and nuclear weapons issues. There are some environmental groups, but basically that would be it, and that's part of the overall situation in Russia with the non-governmental groups, which have been under some stress lately, as you may know.
Goodness. Next question, I think, was you.
Walter Dorn from the Canadian Pugwash Group. I believe that both the U.S. and Russia have agreed to the ultimate goal of zero nuclear weapons. Indeed, they're obliged to it under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. What are the prospects for actual plan or some framework or some practical commitment for that in the coming years?
Well, as I said, I don't think we should expect a treaty that would commit the United States and Russia to zero nuclear weapons, or even to, as I said, even to 1,000 nuclear weapons or 500 nuclear weapons. I think the process will be different if we keep the momentum that is of the START process. If we keep that, if we keep the if we keep transparency, accountability, and verification framework, if we keep if we maintain the cooperation between the countries, then I think it relatively quickly. I think we're talking about maybe a decade or maybe a little more. In that kind of time, most countries will realize that actually nuclear weapons are not as vital for their security as they may think. So I think that would be more of a kind of a natural dying out process in nuclear arsenals, and we see some signs of that process actually starting already. That in the United States, the role of nuclear weapons, if you ask the military, they would tell you that they don't really believe that nuclear weapons have a useful role anymore. And in Russia, it will take a little longer to get that sense of kind of a lack of utility of nuclear weapons, but we will get there. It is important to, as I said, it is important to keep our relationships as non-adversarial as possible, and that's the key for that process.
Alan Slavin, Pugwash and Science for Peace. One of the major concerns is proliferation of nuclear weapons to other countries, particularly with the increase of potential nuclear power in the face of global warming. I believe that the United States and Russia have both had discussions about control of the nuclear fuel cycle as a way of avoiding some of those problems, but I wonder if you can just clarify that and discuss to what extent that's an area of cooperation.
Thank you. That's a very important point. I think there is a cooperation in nuclear non-proliferation is one of the most important areas, and I think there are promising signs there. For example, Russia actually has been trying to do its share. It is, as you know, it is practicing the fuel cycle arrangements that encourage other countries not to have sensitive technologies on their soil. So Russia is ready, actually the only country that is ready to supply fuel to nuclear reactors and to take that fuel back. It's a fairly controversial in Russia policy in Russia from the environmental point of view, but from the non-proliferation point of view, this is a very important development. All other countries actually don't want the spent fuel back. Russia has this major initiative, the Angarsk Center for Enrichment Center, which is open for multinational cooperation. And I think it's a very good area for cooperation. For example, Russia and the United States could try to work together, and I think they should work together on figuring out how to manage the multinational enrichment centers, how to safeguard them, how to make sure that there is no proliferation of technologies, no transfer of sensitive technologies. And Russia could use its Angarsk facility for that, and the United States could use its enrichment facility that it's building there, the Urenco facility that are being built there by the Europeans. Canada actually has a say in one of the new facilities, and Canada has an important role in the one of the enrichment facilities that will be built in the United States, the Silex process GE Hitachi, and it's very important. Again, that might be a very important area for cooperation. Finding out the ways of preventing the spread of nuclear technologies at these kind of facilities, because this is a very new and yet unknown to the international inspectors, safeguard inspectors process. So I think it's a very important area, and I think there is a great potential there.
And we have time for one very, very brief question.
Yes, thank you. I would just like to know, how do you view the present relationship between the nuclear nations of South Asia in terms of, obviously, the nuclear question?
Well, it's a little bit far from Russia and the United States, but I think they are in the same process as everyone else, in the sense that they certainly, if you look at their nuclear programs, India and Pakistan, they go back quite a while ago, and there was a certain momentum there. But I would argue actually that when once they obtained nuclear weapons, those two countries quickly discovered that those weapons actually do not add anything significant to their security. And for example, if you look at Pakistan, you would definitely, I think you would agree that for the state of Pakistan, for the country, the internal instabilities and the rise of Taliban and the extremists of that kind certainly poses a much more serious threat to the survival of the state than the invasion from India. And it's clear that there is not very much you can do against the insurgents with nuclear weapons. So I think this is again, it will be a very fairly long and torturous process, but I think eventually both countries will realize that nuclear weapons are not really an essential element of their security. And that realization would allow us to bring them into the disarmament process as well.